This is where the entire episode is the rabbit hole. We find that the wines that we like the most, the vineyards that produce wines with complexity and energy, generally come from biodynamic vineyards. There are several reasons for this. The winemakers have a passion for the ecosystem, where healthy plants coexist. It takes more work to be biodynamic. You must be passionate. Most of these people have done their research and maybe experimented to see if this really worked. The second is you can see the results in the soil. As the plants mature, animals and the good insects start appearing. Biodynamics takes time, generally 5 to 8 years, but when it takes off, you can see the results all around. We will start with a refresher, the biodynamic basics. Then we will share thoughts on biodynamics from the people who are doing this, the winemakers and the wineries that we have visited over the years. They each bring a different perspective, but all share a common goal of wanting to make the land better. Then we take a leap down another rabbit hole to regenerative agriculture. We will discuss how this all ties into regenerating our soils around the globe, allowing us to eat healthier and mending the planet. A couple of these vineyards have taken the additional step of being Regenerative Organic certified. These wineries are leading by example and can lead us forward into a better future. Commercially farmed vineyards add chemicals to the soil to maintain the health of the vines. In a biodynamic vineyard, this is maintained through the natural microbiome in the soil. These microbes are depleted through the lack of biodiversity, tilling, and chemicals which kill moth. Normal, natural soil in a natural ecosystem is filled with microbes that move the soil and allow nutrients into the vines. Biodynamics promotes biodiversity, while vineyards are a monoculture by adding cover crops, riparian areas, gardens, trees, and livestock. You can build up the biodiversity on the farm, creating a full ecosystem, which is much healthier. This type of agriculture also uses preparations. Rather than pesticides to kill off unwanted pests, these preparations, made from natural ingredients from the property, help to spread the microbiome in the vineyard and add natural teas to healthy compost to nourish the soil. You will often see owl boxes and raptor perches in these vineyards as a natural way to keep down pests like gophers and birds who eat the grapes. Compost for biodynamic farming is different. Often when you see compost being made, the farmers have a temperature gauge to be sure the pile is warm enough to kill off the microbes. In biodynamics, the farmers are looking to keep those microbes, so the temperature of the compost pile is kept lower, turning it more often to keep it cool. Ideally, all the preparations come from the farm. Gardens with valerian, chamomile, horsetail herb, yarrow, and dandelion are grown. And the manure would come from the animals on the farm. This maintains the ecosystem in a way that is closer to natural. This type of farming also works by the phases of the moon, and there is a calendar divided into fruit, flower, leaf, and root days. These are meant to guide farmers on when to plant, harvest, and prune. So let's hear from some of the biodynamic properties we visited. We will begin with Tablas Creek, the first biodynamic vineyard we ever visited. Tablas Creek in Paso Robles is a project with the Haas family of vineyard brands and the Perrin family of Chateau de Beaucastel in the Rhône Valley of France. The Perrins know the importance of keeping your property healthy through generations and are used to thinking long-term with their winery in Châteauneuf-du-Pape. The property is on the Paso Robles west side in an area now known as the Adelaide District AVA. Purchased in 1989, the planting with Châteauneuf-du-Pape vines began in 1994. Tablas received its organic certification in 2003, began using biodynamics in 2010, and received their Biodynamic certification in 2017. Jason Haas, the general manager of Taples Creek, speaks to us about how they incorporate biodynamics. Biodynamics, it's a big controversy out there. There's some people that are biodynamics as a hoax and some people that love biodynamics, and I've actually spoken with winemakers that will be having conversations and they'll be telling me how much they hate biodynamics and how silly they think it is, and the next topic that comes up is Taples Creek and they can't see enough good things about you. So how do you manage to skirt that issue, and where do you stand on the biodynamics?
So I would say that we are skeptical biodynamicists. I think the fundamental piece of biodynamics is that it's in your best interests to encourage as much diversity as you can in your vineyard. Vineyards are naturally prone to being a monoculture, that you have vines and nothing else in your land, and monocultures are inherently unstable. So what you have, if all you have is vineyard, is you have an environment that will attract pests that eat grapevines. You probably don't have much that control the pests that eat grapevines, because all you have is grapevines. So I think the fundamental piece of biodynamics for us is to try to build an environment, an ecosystem that's as resilient as possible, to plant other species as much as we can within the grapevine. You can see some of the fruit sitting in front of an apple tree. We have pears and peaches and quinces and olive trees and different kinds of flowering plants, things that will attract different populations of insects, different microorganisms in the soil. And that just seems to us like good common sense with farming. You avoid all of the poisons and other things that you would do anyway if you're farming organically, or you're doing it in the interest of creating an ecosystem that's alive and resilient. I think that some of the aspects of biodynamics that come under the most fire are a little silly, honestly. I mean, do we bury the cow horns with different preparations of quartz and manure and things like that in them? Yeah, because it's not really very hard to do, and it certainly seems like it can't do any harm. Do I think makes a big difference in the things that we produce and the health of the vineyard? No, not really.
Taples Creek came to biodynamics through the parents in France, since they were farming this way. Without that influence, why would someone look into biodynamics? Rudy Marchesi at Montanore can give us some insight into that. Montanore Estate is in Oregon's Tualatin Hills AVA, located in the northern part of the Willamette Valley. They are one of the largest producers of estate-certified biodynamic grapes in the country. We visited with Rudy in 2018, and he explained how he came to biodynamics.
Actually, I was motivated by the phylloxera.
Oh.
We were seeing some vine loss due to phylloxera, and I thought, how are we going to combat this?
Right.
Just ripping it out and replanting was not a viable option. So then I started learning about soil microbiology and how that impacted the whole interplay of in the root system, and how it, in a way, mitigated the effects of phylloxera. So we moved more and more into organic, and went kind of cold turkey into organic. And the biodynamic stuff, when I worked for the wholesale importer, I managed portfolios out of Europe, and I started noticing that the wines I liked the best were biodynamic. What was that about? And I'd had a friend after college had gone to a farm in Findhorn, Scotland, and spent 8 months there, and came back just totally blown away by the agriculture. It was all biodynamic. On what it was, this sort of rocky, fringed farm, they turned it into this incredibly abundant place. So I knew about it, but there wasn't any real, there weren't any good books. There wasn't, where do you go for it? And I found there were only 2 places in the United States that had training at that time. And it was a little college in New York State, and they had a course that was once a month for 9 months, and then a 5-day intensive. So I took that to learn about how to do it, and started trying it out here, and had tremendous results right away. So it was by the time I bought the business, and our first growing season was 2006. I was doing a lot of biodynamic work all over here. I'd been kind of playing around with it, but that freed me up to make the investment. And then by 2008, we were certified, and we've been doing it ever since. So. Yeah, I mean, the biodynamic practices were established as agricultural practices.
Right.
So there wasn't any talk about winemaking. So biodynamic winemaking, it's just an extension of the thought process. The calendar days and all, they're a nice guideline. There are clearly things you don't do. For example, last year when we had the total eclipse of the sun, at this time of year, I always plant. I have a big garden, good vegetable garden, and I always plant my fall vegetables. So I planted 2 weeks before the eclipse, one row of all my fall escargots and endives and things, and then I do a second one a couple weeks later, and the second one was the day before the eclipse. Mm-hmm. And I had read that for a total eclipse, you don't do anything for a couple days on either side, and it was a gorgeous day, and I knew the next day we'd be out looking at the eclipse and gone, and I just wanted to get this stuff in. So I planted the second row on the Saturday before within probably 24 hours. The first row came up beautifully. The second row, I had maybe 15% germination.
Yep.
Nothing different. Soil, water, seed, everything the same. I thought, okay.
Plants like everything else on the planet are kind of freaking out with the eclipse. So,
yeah, totally. So
go.
Big events like that are really significant. Blackout days, we don't pick on blackout days. We try to avoid all that stuff. Pruning, we have to prune from January 1st until March 20th, and it's all got to be done.
Yeah.
So we don't take days off, blackout or not, leaf day or not. And in terms of tasting and racking, I don't know. I just pay attention to see if it makes a big difference or not.
There you go.
Yeah.
Washington's Yakima Valley sits in an agricultural belt. While the high desert climate would seem to limit pest and disease pressure, the monoculture agriculture is attractive for pests. Those pests then make growing organically or biodynamically more difficult. But some vineyards, like Hedges in Red Mountain and Woolridge in Natchez Heights, are doing the extra work to make this method work. In Washington's Red Mountain AVA, Sarah Hedges Goodhart is continuing a family legacy. Her parents purchased this property in 1989. In 2006, Sarah joined them as their assistant winemaker. In 2015, she became their head winemaker. They converted to Biodynamics in 2008, and it suits the property. Sarah exudes energy, and working in this beautiful place with these biodynamic vineyards is her happy place. This interview is from 2019. Since then, they've continued growing in biodynamics and regenerative farming.
So yeah, it's good, and we've converted. The biodynamic conversion came about in 2007, and so now we've got 3 vineyards that are fully biodynamic and organic, and 2 vineyards that are organic. And we're, slowly adding livestock, mostly just chickens. So eventually we want to get some sheep. And, every time you add stuff like that, there's infrastructure that needs to happen. And it's this sort of, but we like taking slow steps so that we understand it fully before going on to another step. Yeah. Because, always the most important thing is the grapes and the wine. And, that's the lifeblood of this place. So that's what we need to focus on first.
Right, and every time you add something too, it changes your ecosystem slightly.
Yep.
So it also gives, I suppose, the property time to adapt to that new thing in the ecosystem before moving on.
Yeah.
Biodynamics is done all over the world. We visited New South Wales, Australia a few years ago and spoke to 2 winemakers in 2 different regions who had different difficulties and pressures. Rod Windrum, the founder and former owner of Crinklewood, first started coming to the Hunter Valley in New South Wales, Australia in 1978. In 1981, he and his family planted a vineyard in Polkabin in the Hunter Valley. Things got too suburban for them in Polkabin, and they looked further out into the country and moved to the tiny town of Broke. In 1996, they decided to plant a vineyard in Broke. They spent 2 years doing the research with soil pits and testing, and planted in 1998. Rod found a book by Niccolo Joly on biodynamics and was fascinated. The synergy of this agricultural method really attracted him. After starting biodynamic practices in 2002, they became certified in 2007. We visited with Rod in 2019. Rod sold the vineyard in 2021, and the new owners were inspired by Rod's biodynamic methods and are continuing this farming method. They will be adding a performance venue on the property, as well as a biodynamic and organic education center, a project that Rod began.
We came to Australia for the Wine Media Conference in the Hunter Valley. Sitting west of the main section of the Hunter Valley, you will find the sub-region of Broke-Fordwich. It's a little quieter here than in Polkabang, where so many of the big wineries are located. Travel south from the village of Broke on Wallambi Road. There you will find Crinklewood.
Let's go for a wander.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Well, actually, I thought what we'd do is we'd just go for a wander down around to the shed and down around the vineyard and then back up.
That sounds great.
Chat on the way.
That sounds perfect. The flow forms and tanks are for making the biodynamic teas, which are used in the vineyard. They also have a patch where they bury their cow horns for 2 of the biodynamic preparations that they use. Biodynamics is really all about having a self-sustaining farm. The preparations are used in lieu of pesticides and fertilizers. These are made from plants grown in the vineyard and from manure from the cows on the property. They use these natural preparations rather than something brought in that was chemically made in a factory somewhere. Rod is well read on the subject of biodynamics and rattled off a series of books and authors that he had taken inspiration from. These range from microbiologists to biodynamic agriculture specialists to a scientist whose focus is on plant frequencies.
Getting an understanding of the biology that you've got, like beneficial critters in your compost or your compost tea, and even doing things like measuring the biological coverage on a leaf. We send it away to a lab, and if you get up to about 80% biological coverage on your leaf, the nasties won't attack it.
Rod tells me that they check the Brix levels in the stems. If the level gets to 16 to 18 Brix, pests won't attack it. Pests are predators, and they look for weak plants to attack. This is where he refers to the work of Philip Callahan, who studied the frequencies that plants give off. The frequency, when a plant is not healthy, can be picked up by pests who will then attack.
David Lowe knew he wanted to be a winemaker when he was 15. In his early career in the industry, he worked for a wine company and was exposed to wines from around the world. With his boss, he tasted the 20 top-rated wines in the world at the time. 9 of these wines were biodynamic or organic, so he knew there was something to this. He has spent over 20 years constantly improving their biodynamic and organic property in Mudgee. The property has orchards, gardens, livestock, composting, and vineyards. The vineyards in Mudgee have been dealing with long-term drought. David believes that his vineyard has become more drought-resistant over the past 20 years. By removing the damaging pesticides and letting diverse native grasses grow, they have limited pests. By dry farming, they force the vine roots to dig deep to find their own water.
Australia is one of the oldest land masses on the planet, which makes the soils very interesting. David explains to us the variations in soil that make the Mudgee region even more unique.
When you talk about how deep your roots have gone here, what kind of soils are you dealing with here in Mudgee? And are they varying, or do you find that they're pretty homogeneous across the...
Australia's is the oldest, part of Gondwana land in Antarctica. It's the oldest landform in the world.
Right.
So it's heavily eroded. So you will find that any changes in soil have come from erosion. So good soils move to the bottom. Entropy, chaos, disorder. The topsoil's washed to the bottom. And generally the top of the hills here are denuded of topsoil and stonier and rockier. The bottom are silt and low S and a better soil. And on anywhere where there's slope, you'll get variation. And then when there's variation, it's a delight for a winemaker. And as what we've tried to do geologically is to map our soils and to work with it. And that's where Biodynamics, we're a fellow traveller, because we're looking at what happens in the soil. Geologically, we're a lot of quartz here, a lot of shale, a lot of deposition. That quartz and shale has got a lot of minerals in it. And of course the landforms, and it's well drained. That's the important part of grapevines. They need to be well drained. They need to have a slope or soil which drains water. They don't like wet feet. So we've used slope and we've used the soil to allow our roots to go deep, to access minerals, to get permanency, drought resistance and ultimate quality. And we've taken that mantra, I talked about before about productivity, to a new level. We've said we don't care what crop we get off it. Any 1 year we care it's the best wine possible. And because we're in control of our market and because we're in control of our sales, as you see, our only sales are here, we can tell the message. People can respond to the authenticity of growing and making it and selling it on site. So that's worked with us. Probably as an accident, but we're not going to stop it now.
Wayne Bailey at Youngberg Hill saw what commercial farming was doing to the central part of our country. He knew that he wanted a better way of growing when he started his vineyard in the McMinnville AVA of Oregon's Willamette Valley. Wayne has been farming organically and biodynamically, and he has incorporated no-till methods into his farming. Founded in 1989, Youngberg Hill believes in being attentive to your farm. Wayne grew up in Iowa, and his background is in agriculture. His career led him to the food and beverage industry, which landed him in Burgundy for a contract. After his consulting gig finished, he stayed on, getting hands-on experience with vignerons who considered themselves to be farmers. He knew then that this was what he wanted to do. He and his wife purchased Youngberg Hill in 2003. She maintains the inn, which gives them another revenue stream, and he grows grapes. He's passionate about caring for the land, and they maintain a biodiverse property with Scottish Highland cows, goats, chickens, riparian areas, gardens, bees. They focus not just on the wine or the grapes, but the entire property, and especially the soil, which Wayne sees as the foundation.
I've always said that if there's one thing that I want you to remember when you leave this hill, it's that wine is an agricultural product. And so that's what you're going to, everything I say is going to reinforce that. And the other thing that I always say is that wine is made in the vineyard, not in the winery. So that's our whole philosophy on everything here, and the focus on the attention of the vineyard. And because of our sustainable practices, it's really focusing not just on the fruit and not just on the vine, but it's a focus on the whole environment. And more in particular, over the last few years, it's really been focused on the soil. Because that's the foundation. And if you don't have healthy soil, you can't have healthy plants, and ergo everything else. So, we want to make sure that the soil is healthy as can be. So we start out no synthetics. Then the biodynamic farming, which enriches the soil. It's those things you can do. And now the no-till farming has been really, we started doing that in 2016, 2017, and really starting to show the impacts of that. It's a little tougher this year with the dryness and the heat and things, but there's two key things that I'm seeing, and we're still seeing results of it. But one is the ability for the plants to be somewhat self-regulating. Yeah. They're kind of like, oh, if you quit disturbing us, we can take care of ourselves, kind of thing. Yeah. And so, which kind of goes along the lines of, if you're farming is by nature impactful on nature. Okay,
Right.
so minimizing that as much as we can allows nature to do what it does best.
Right.
And so no-till really falls in with that
Yeah.
really well.
Yeah.
So that's the one thing I found is that the vines have really become a little bit self monitoring in terms of the amount of vegetation they grow, their health, and all those things that you look for to produce, great fruit. And ergo, the second thing is consistently we've had a little bit less yield, but the fruit has been really, really good quality and very, very balanced
Right.
going into the winery. So.
That seems to make such sense that the grapes have so much that they have to keep track of as far as weather, right? As
Yeah.
far as what the weather is changing. And then also that suddenly if you're tilling and you're doing a lot in the vineyard with all that intervention, they're always like, wait, is somebody going to do this? Because I mean,
It's almost shock. Every
is,
time you
yeah.
hit them, there's a shock
right,
there.
and
Yeah.
it's another curveball that you've thrown at this plant that was trying to figure out its environment and its atmosphere.
Everything that I try to do on the farm is almost antithesis to how they're growing corn in Iowa today. Okay, it's it's industrial chemical farming of corn in Iowa, and I just see how it is just totally decimated the land and the soil. It's dead, and I'm just one of the things that when we moved out here and took over the property that one of my goals, other than to produce great fruit, was to leave this vineyard and leave this property healthier when I leave it than it was when I bought it, and for it to get better and improve it. So I don't look at anything in isolation in terms of, well, I want to get the vines healthier, I want to make higher quality wine and everything. It's how am I going to make the environment healthier? How am I going to improve the soil and make sure that it's better tomorrow than it is today? Looking at all of those things. And if you do all of those things right, then the rest will come. So that was the mindset for organic farming. But I always say organic farming tells you what you can't do, but it doesn't tell you anything about what you can do. And that's then when evolution into biodynamics, which then says, okay, here's the things that may, not necessarily always will, or do you have to take I don't take a prescriptive approach to biodynamics. I take more of a pragmatic approach. So I don't spray all 9 preparations every year. I only spray those that the environment, the vines, the soil are telling me that I should. I'm always prepared to if I need to. I've got all the tea formulas and everything, and I can do that. But I only do it if it tells me to, as opposed to me thinking I know better and I should be doing whatever it tells me to do. So that took us into biodynamics, and then there was a professor up at Washington University who's done a lot of studying in this, and I read one of his books back in 2014 or 2015 on no-till. And boy, that resonated with me because he did studies all over the world, but it was really the ones that he did in the Midwest and really articulated very finely what I experienced in farming in the Midwest and corn farming in particular, where you looked at a field of corn, and then on the end, by the fence line where you turn around, of course there's no fences anymore, the land would be 2 feet higher than the farm, what you were farming. And that's because of erosion. No-till, it's because of tilling, and then as a result of that, erosion. So 2 feet of that, and it just continuing on, and so I go, well, that makes total sense. And then the whole other aspect is that when you have a whole another environment underneath the soil. You know, the biomass and the bioorganisms and everything that's there, and built around that the structure of the wine roots and the grape roots. And so you don't want to disturb that. And you don't want to disturb everything else. You don't want to dig up. So that was part of the no-till. The other one, which I did some experiments back in 2012, 2013, was all around plowing under cover crops. And there used to be a mindset, there still is a lot of the mindset out there, that, well, when it's drying, certainly if you're not irrigating, and you want to take away that competition for moisture. The grass is no competition for the vines and moisture. They're not even at the same level. And we also found out that if you plow everything under, now the ground has no shade. It has no protection. So you're actually drying out the subsoil moisture faster than if you left the cover crop. So that was the impetus behind no-till.
We were lucky to spend a morning with Bill Steele at Cowhorton Vineyard. We met with Bill in 2019. He and Barb have since sold the property, but the new owners are continuing to farm biodynamically. In fact, they are searching out and purchasing Biodynamic Vineyards. This is a company that is sure that biodynamic farming is the way of the future. I think that bodes well for all of us.
I think the thing that's most important about it to me is 365 days a year I can have people on the property. My friends' kids, my nieces, my nephews, the dogs, people bring dogs every day. There is no hazmat suit here. So it's a safe environment, and that's one of the reasons why you see all these birds here. So prior to Barb and I finding the property, it had been left alone for 15 years. So we started with a blank canvas. We've been now operating it for 16 years, so it's documented 30 years without synthetic chemicals. That's why we have boatloads of birds and boatloads of bees. And so I think what really floats my boat, well, there's several things about biodynamics, but one of them that's important is it's a safe place for people to visit.
So with the biodynamics, why was it important to you to be Demeter certified, to actually go for this certification?
Because wine travels. And so when you're across, I have distribution all the way to the East Coast. So if you and I are sitting down in, let's say, Richmond, Virginia, and we tell the staff person we would like something that's biodynamic, it's nice to have it certified so that, okay, it's not biodynamic principles or whatever.
Right.
It's certified
it's
biodynamic.
Actually certified.
Yeah. I think when you're local, like we are with the asparagus, people can visit me and they okay, yeah, he is. But when wine in particular goes across the country, and so I think the Demeter certification is important.
Excellent. Your inspiration for biodynamics, I know that you said it was Alan York is kind of the person who came in and helped you with consulting on this?
As the story goes, that we got the property, Barb was helping farmers in the Cape Hay Valley, which is in California, and she was doing a lot of pro bono work for these farmers for business strategies and financials. And when we got the property, they said, you might want to research different farming methods. And so we were basically, Barb and I and our dogs were leading this homeopathic organic lifestyle. And so Barb stumbled upon biodynamics, which has got a very strong homeopathic bent. But really what brought us to biodynamics was the group. So she went to a biodynamic farmers meeting in Sonoma, and she called me up on the cell and she said, these are our friends. Same reverence for the earth, very common sense approach to farming, but a very inclusive group of people. It's not like I got a secret, you figure it out. So what happened once we got, we were here and we started realizing we were going to grow grapes. So Doug Tennell, who runs Brick House up in the Willamette, Doug said, come on up, I'll show you what I do and why. He's biodynamic. And then Mike Benzinger down in Sonoma, Mike said, come on down, I'll show you what I do and why. And that's really what brought us. It was philosophically aligned, but it's this really inclusive group of people. And so now here we are, 16 years later, and there's a local vineyard, Troon. Troon is going biodynamic. They're in the transition. And so we've been helping them just like folks helped us.
The winery. It's the part of biodynamics that usually I don't hear anything about. You hear a lot about the biodynamics in the vineyard and how you do that, but on your site you could talk a little bit about how you take the biodynamic practices into the winery. And I'm curious about that because I don't know much about that aspect of it.
Well, I think in terms of the wines, there are no chemicals in the wine. So, not obviously, but in biodynamic farming, there's no synthetic chemicals in the fields. There's over 200 additions that wineries can put into our wines without disclosing. The only one that we can read about is sulfites. So at Cowhorn, as the winemaker, I can guarantee you there are no additives in there. So it's what's in my wine. I actually make my own sulfites. What I do is I take distilled water and pure SO2 gas, and I diffuse SO2 gas through the water to a certain concentration. The reason for that is that most folks will use something called potassium metabisulfite. I don't really know exactly what's in it, but what I wanted was the purest wine that I could have. So what's in my wines are biodynamic grapes, Demeter certified, a little bit of distilled water, and a little bit of SO2 gas, and that's it.
You may have seen our previous episode on Troon in Oregon's Applegate Valley. We visited with them in August of 2021. Troon is newer to biodynamics, and Bill and Barb at Cowhorn helped to mentor them through the process. Here you find gardens planted with the plants they use for their biodynamic preparations. They have worm bins for natural soil amendments and can add teas to the soils through their drip irrigation system, which means fewer passes with a tractor in the vineyard. They have a dairy farm across the road where they get their manure. They also have sheep that they allow in the vineyards in the winter. The sheep help to naturally aerate the soil with their hooves without packing the soil like a tractor would. The sheep eat the cover crop and leave behind manure. They're growing apple trees and have a bee rewilding project with hives where they don't harvest the honey. Craig Camp tells us that bee rewilding is helpful in reestablishing the bees' natural immune systems. They work to make the property a single ecosystem that includes the people. So what's the next step? Regenerative Organic Certified is a new certification by the Regenerative Organic Alliance. Founded in 2017, the organization promotes a system of farming that is better for the planet by focusing on soil health, animal welfare, and social fairness. This is encouraged by discontinuing the use of poisonous chemicals, creating biodiversity on farms, cutting back on tillage, treating the livestock and animals on the property with respect, and caring for the people who work the land. Their motto is, "Farm like the world depends on it." If you have seen the movie Kiss the Ground, you have a bit of an idea behind the soil health pillar of Regenerative Organic Certified. We spoke with Wayne Bailey at Youngberg Hill about no-till, and that alone could make a huge difference in climate change. Tilling releases carbon into the air. Sequestering carbon in the soil cuts our carbon footprint dramatically. Elizabeth Whitlow is the executive director of the Regenerative Organic Alliance. She worked for CCOF, California Certified Organic Farmers, for many years, covering the Sonoma region, so wine country is something she knows well. She saw organic agriculture take hold and watched firsthand as the quality of properties and produce improved. She started with the Alliance in 2018 and worked with the 19 pilot farms in 8 different countries to kick off the certification. With Patagonia and Dr. Bronner's as founding members, they have a sphere of influence over the farms that they source from and are working to make all of their supply chain regenerative organic certified. Elizabeth can see the difference regenerative farming is having on the land and the people. She watches as farmers see their neighbors' properties improving and get on board with these regenerative practices.
And what I can dream of is that the ROA has these flagship farms all over the world that people can go to and see this firsthand.
Yes.
And farmers included. You know, if you have a place like that in any community, every farmer is always looking over their neighbor's fence. What is she doing over there? What is he doing over there? What is this new rotational grazing thing? Like, I remember everybody in the dairy world in Sonoma County used to make fun of this one farmer. Everybody loved to make fun of him. They laughed and laughed about him setting up all these strip, like they're like just making fun of him for setting up this strip grazing infrastructure to move his cows so that he maximized his forage intake. And he also maximized the regrowth of the pasture by doing rotational grazing. And they all thought he was nuts.
Yeah.
And every one of them now does it because they also saw that the feed truck quit coming over there because the cows were eating off the pasture instead of spreading around and inefficiently utilizing it. He was getting an extra 2 months of grazing. And guess what? The vet didn't have to go over there anymore because the cows were walking out in the pasture like they're supposed to do and they're eating grass. So his vet bills went down. The milk tank kept coming and picking up milk. He got a new tractor. He got a new car. You know, and all the other farmers were like, oh, shoot, what are we doing? And so they started to. So that's how farmers make change. They're smart business people, but they do need to see it in action. They can't take chances.
Teblis Creek Vineyard was in that pilot program of 19 farms I spoke of earlier. Already organic and biodynamic certified, they had a leg up on this certification. They stopped all use of pesticides when they became organic and worked hard on soil health with their biodynamic certification. They already had animal welfare guidelines in place for their livestock and had a full-time vineyard team. Jason said that while they felt they had always treated their staff fairly, the new certification allowed them access to new methods of team building that within a year have made a difference in productivity and general well-being. Jason spoke with us about why they chose to be part of the pilot program.
It felt to us like regenerative organics. It sort of had the breadth of the best of the sustainability certifications with the rigor of biodynamics and the holistic approach of biodynamics, but without all of the mysticism pieces. And the other thing that we really liked about it is that it wasn't a wine specific certification. So this was something where wine is just one of the many product types that are under this umbrella. And that meant that it had the chance to really move the needle societally, we felt like, in a way that we hadn't seen before. And if we were given the opportunity to help craft these standards within the world of wine and then promote them within the world of wine and show that it works and it's possible in the world of wine, that has the potential to make a real difference. And given that roughly a third of the Earth's landmass is used for agriculture, if agriculture can't be a part of the solution to these big picture challenges like resource scarcity and climate change, they're probably not a solvable problem. So just the opportunity to be a part of something that looked like it could point the way towards agriculture, not just not contributing to the problem, but actively helping solve the problems, felt like an opportunity that was too important to pass up.
Troon was the second vineyard in the country to be regenerative organic certified. They too were certified organic and biodynamic, but as a smaller vineyard with a smaller staff, the certification was a bit different. When I spoke with Craig, the general manager for Troon, he told me why he was attracted to the certification. He feels that organics told him what not to do, biodynamics gave him proactive actions to make the soil better, and regenerative, well, they actually do the science and measurements to be sure the soil is improving, increasing the organic matter, and sequestering carbon.
We've been certified biodynamic for a couple of years, and there's parts of biodynamics. I say we kind of follow the more practical side of biodynamics, and I think that often that spiritual side scares people away from it. They don't realize that you can practice it without going full Steiner, and so the regenerative organic certification, I felt kind of addressed that and would be able to have a broader reach, which I think is kind of the key because, it's great what we do on our 100 acres, but we need millions of acres to really make a difference in the world. So, that's, one of our main goals is to get other people to change the way they farm too.
Right.
So I felt the Regenerative Organic Alliance had that mission and a broader mission than sometimes Biodynamics does. But we're still practicing biodynamics totally.
Right.
I mean, totally still doing this. And I think the major difference between regenerative organic and these other certifications is, organic agriculture, they're basically telling you what not to do. And biodynamics I see as this, kind of proactive probiotic program. You're doing all these ferments and building soil health, but regenerative organic, you actually have to prove you're making the soil better. So you have every few years you have to get your soil samples and show that you are, increasing carbon sequestration and organic matter in your soils. And, that's not, I think we do that by biodynamics. we're doing that, but they don't actually measure that. And then, of course, a major tenet of regenerative organic on the agriculture side is no-till, getting away from tilling. And that's really not part of biodynamics yet, but I think most biodynamic farmers end up doing that anyway.
Regenerative agriculture is the new buzzword. It has taken over where sustainability left off. And well, the words really say that, don't they? Rather than sustaining farms at the level they are currently at, we need to move to regenerating them, as we have lost so much in the way of biodiversity and soil health.
Leading refrain of feedback I got after the pilot, which it's my favorite thing, is that from India to Kansas, people talked about how songbirds had returned to the farm that they remembered from when their grandparents farmed. So we wipe out the songbirds. We wipe out, we spray these pesticides and chemicals that kill all of life. And so it's something Paul Dolan actually says that we love is this. It was actually inspired by Hunter Lovins and her one of her recent books, but it's farming in the service of life. And I think that really captures it beautifully, because it's in the service of all life, whether you're talking about the soil microbiome, the humans, the birds, the plants, everything. So.
Talking about these farming techniques is important, but so is the final product. If all of this is creating an inferior product, many will say it's not worth it. The truth is that in most cases, the product is better. David Lowe mentioned that 9 of the top 20 wines he tasted were organic or biodynamic, and that was 20 years ago. In tasting wines, I am drawn to biodynamic wines. I often find them to be more dynamic and energized with deeper nuances than other wines. Of course, the stories help. Passionate people make passionate wines, and their stories do influence how you interpret what you taste in the glass. Are you ready to continue discovering wine country? Follow us on social media for all the juicy bits. We are on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Discover Wine CGC. If you're headed to wine country and want to share the experience, join our Facebook group, Discovering Wine Country, where writers and content creators are sharing what they are discovering in wine country around the globe. For even more great content, visit our sister site, Crushed Grape Chronicles.